There are three challenges that educators have always faced, and online learning has made them harder, and now AI has made them impossible to ignore. The three things are proof of work, proof of performance, and evidence of learning. In other words, are students doing the work? Are they actually demonstrating some type of skill? And do we have evidence that they've actually learned along the way? And I'm going to show you how I design educational simulations to address all three of these issues and these challenges. And I've refined this approach over nearly 30 years of instructional design, and it's been used by thousands of instructors with millions of students. And the examples I'm going to show you two examples. They're both from business education, but the methodology is flexible enough to work across virtually any subject, educational setting, or instructional model. Okay, so the two methods I'm going to show you, method one is using real time play. And the simulation example is going to be a small business simulation. Method two is using strategic assessment. And the example I'm going to use there is a sports and entertainment management simulation. All right, let's take a look at the first simulation. So, this is a small business slash entrepreneurship simulation, incredibly realistic, many types of businesses that I can operate, but I'm operating a restaurant business. And I can do everything that a real restaurant owner would do. So, I can review my products, and I'm running a hamburger business. And so, I've got hamburgers and French fries and chicken and so on, and I can adjust prices. I can see what the products are made of, which means I have to order inventory from different suppliers. I can manage employees once I review different job applicants, and I can hire people to work for me. Once I hire them to work for me, I can go to my schedule and schedule them to work at different days of the week and so on. I've got marketing, I've got finance I have to deal with, and all sorts of reports. And so let's take a look at customers coming into the business. So right now it's almost midnight. So I'm going to go home and we're going to get some sleep and arrive to work next morning. And here we go. So now we're seeing customers arriving in the business in real time, and there's customer feedback that's appearing above my location of my business, my restaurant. And here we can see the time. So there's a real time clock. Actually, it's accelerated real time, and everything's happening by this clock. Now I can slow it down if I want a little bit more thinking time. But the premise is that it's creating a real life sense of urgency where I can't just take all day to make decisions on everything. I've got to balance my time and prioritize accordingly. And so the way the simulation works in terms of proof of work is that there's no way to automate this process. I have to make all the decisions from pricing products, ordering inventory, planning to make sure I don't run out of inventory, evaluating customer feedback, and so on. I cannot automate. So I've just opened up the Gemini window, and here I can ask Gemini questions about what's happening in my business to help me improve, but it's Gemini can't do the work for me. I can use it as a coach, as an advisor, which is actually a great way to learn AI prompting and the benefits of AI, because that's how we're going to use it in the real world. So students get that opportunity to apply it in the context of running a business. Now you may say, okay, Matthew, Gemini is not really an agent. What about Claude? Let's open up Claude and launch some type of agent to actually run the simulation for me. And my answer to that is good luck, because number one, you can see how complex this simulation is and how complex the prompt would have to be to even attempt to have it run. But then it also has to read various reports, balance sheets, income statement, customer feedback reports. The size of the prompt would be enormous. The amount of effort and time it would take to create such a prompt and even know that it's actually working properly would be far more effort than actually doing the work yourself and doing the simulation. And I can tell you just from my own experience working with all sorts of agents, it's just not going to work. And you're going to end up burning through all of your tokens anyway. So the cost is going to be very high. So you cannot use AI to do the work for you. You can use AI to help you make better decisions, again, which is what we want students to use AI for, but it's not doing the work for you. So this is where proof of work comes in a real time simulation like this, is you cannot have this automated or set it and forget in any way. So when you ask students, I want you to play, in this case, we play simulation days. So in this simulation, if you asked a student to play 30 simulation days a month in business, that would be about 2 hours of effort. And if you look at your instructor dashboard and you see that they've played 30 days, you know that they've put in approximately 2 hours of effort. Some may have put in more than 2 hours of effort, some maybe a little bit less, but because everything runs by a clock, there is a reliable estimate of time and effort. So there you have your proof of work. Next, we have proof of performance. So now I can go to my reports and bring up my performance report. Here's here. And the performance report not only tracks your participation, in other words, did you play the 30, 60, 90, 180 days, whatever that you're required to play, but it actually measures your skill, which we call a skill score, based on a number of metrics, everything from finance metrics like profit, revenue, profit margin, leadership metrics, business reputation, your personal health, if you're working too hard and not spending enough time at home, sleeping, personal time, sales metrics, marketing metrics, operations, employee metrics. So now we're moving into proof of performance. You have to actually make good decisions in the simulation to earn the maximum points that are available here. And because this is realistic business, you're actually never going to be able to get 100% in this particular simulation because there's always a compromise. You can compromise employee morale but benefit your net profit, maybe for a short period of time. Or you can try to treat your employees and your customers really well. That can be a little bit more costly. So maybe your net profit's a little bit lower. And maybe that's better for the long term success of your business. That's up to you to decide as a player, but it does react. The simulation reacts just like the real business would. And so we can use these metrics to actually demonstrate proof of performance, proof of skill. And then we have the final one, the final challenge, which is evidence of learning. So, how can we demonstrate evidence of learning? Well, all these metrics that I've been showing you provide that evidence. So, we can see, for example, let's close this out and look at customers served and lost. So, the simulation tracks how many customers you're losing and why you're losing customers. So, you can see down here on day 25, day 26, I was losing a lot of customers. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't. So something changed. So what we can do is we can actually evaluate this information and say, hey, look, the student was struggling with this particular aspect of business, which it might be inventory management. Maybe I was running out of inventory. It could be service. Maybe I wasn't hiring enough employees or scheduling them properly to cover the demand that I was generating, maybe marketing related, whatever it is. There are metrics that we can observe their change over time to see, hey, the student was struggling and now they're knocking it out of the park. They're doing really great. And so we're now have the numerical or metric evidence of learning that's happening by using a combination of the various metrics that are happening. So this is an example of a somewhat of a real-time simulation that solves the three challenges of proof of work, proof of performance, and evidence of learning. So now we're going to switch over to another simulation to show the second method, which is using strategic assessment. And this is going to be a sports and entertainment management simulation. So the premise here is I am the president and general manager of a new sports organization, and I have to manage and make this organization profitable and successful. And successful means beyond profit. There's all sorts of other metrics that I have to manage. And this is a very different experience than the restaurant simulation that we just played, which is more of a real time. In this experience, there is no clock. There are events in season one. So in this case, there might be 15 events I have to manage, and I manage one event at a time. And the premise is I make decisions for the first event, and then I look at the results and I try to improve it for the next event and the ones that come after it. But I'm given as much time as I need to make decisions between each event. Again, there's no clock here. So let's go a little bit deeper and see how we can set this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my sport, and we've got different sports we can choose from. So I'm going to choose basketball. And then I can go to my venue and I can choose different seating options and so on. And I've got a little testing button here that allows me to preset everything, so I make all the decisions to make it a little bit faster. These are only available to me as a developer, not to the player. And so what I'm going to do now is that I've made all the decisions from venue and people and merchandising, concessions, sponsors, marketing, and so on. I'm going to launch the event and see what happens. And notice before we launch the event, it's now prompting us to put an entry in our strategy journal. I'm going to skip this for now. We'll revisit that in a moment. Let's launch the event. So here's a video that demonstrates the passing and time passing and the management of the event. When this completes in a moment, we're going to see the results. So here's the results. Our team won the first game, which is great. We can see our attendance, 75% capacity. We can see that we were profitable in our first event, which is great. And then we can see some management information that can be helpful in terms of identifying weaknesses that we have. But let's go on to the management and go to our results. So this is where we start to see our performance here. So I mentioned earlier we want to have a profitable business, but also a number of other metrics that are measured. So here are the metrics that are measured. So we've got our team win record, our profitability, our revenue, our profit margin, our attendance number and capacity, our team success. So team success goes beyond just wins and losses, our fan engagement, our personnel morale, our sponsor satisfaction, brand problem solving, and experimentation. So these are all the metrics that are tracked in the simulation, but these are rolled up into 10 metrics for our performance report. So our actual performance itself is measured on these 10 metrics, which are similar to the ones we just saw, and they add up to 100%. So these metrics comprise our skill score, but in order to get our total performance score, we're going to multiply the skill score by participation. So by participation, we mean actually playing all of the events in season one. And this particular simulation right now has 15 of those events. So if I play all 15 events, I'm going to get 100% for participation. And then I'm also going to get whatever I get for my skill score. It's actually going to multiply these two. So I'm not going to get my maximum unless I complete the full experience. But here's the key that's very different about this simulation than the restaurant one. So it goes back to the timing. There is no time here. I can take as much time as I want to make my decisions here. And there's not a whole bunch of things happening on the screen like there are in the other one where I have to manage a whole bunch of things at the same time. It's very bit different here. Here I have time to think about my decisions and lock them in before I advance the simulation to the next event. The problem with that in terms of proof of work is this. So the decisions I have to make is basically a series of drop downs, some of which I can change for every event, some I can't. So once I choose my sport, I can't change that. But let's look at entertainment. So this is my featured entertainment. So I have all sorts of choices here, and maybe I'll choose a culture performance this time, and then next time I'll choose something else. In my people, I've got my athletes, and I've got my payroll. So I started with a budget payroll, but maybe I want to go up to a premium payroll. So the decisions I make here are simple drop down selections. So it's simple to make a decision. It's not simple to think about it, but technically just to make it, I just have to click a drop down. So it is possible for a student to just quickly jump through every screen without thinking about it and just randomly choosing any options that are available. It is possible. And then completing the simulation within, let's say, 20 minutes. Whereas normal play might take 2 to 3 hours if you're playing it thoughtfully. If you don't want to play it thoughtfully, maybe you can get through it in 20 minutes. So, how do we stop that to make sure that we are solving the challenges of proof of work, proof of performance, and evidence of learning? Let me show you how I designed that in here. So, number one is when we launch an event, every time it moves on to the next event, all of these choices get blanked out. So I can't just keep clicking launch event. In fact, you can see here all these X's. These are telling me that I have not made the decisions necessary in order to proceed with the event. We can see that the check mark says people is ready to go. So we're forcing them to at least go into every section. Now, they may still not make thoughtful decisions, but we're forcing them to at least make that attempt. Second, if they don't make thoughtful decisions, guess what? These results are not going to be great. We also have financials and income statement as well, which shows your revenue, expenses, and profit, and your performance report. these metrics are not going to be great. In fact, even if you play thoughtfully and you focus on only one metric, let's say profit, you're only going to get a small score, a low score, if you don't also try to improve and balance everything. So we're using proof of performance to also support proof of work, but there's more to it. Let's take a look at these last two metrics in the skill score. It's problem solving and experimentation. So what we're doing is we're devoting 20% of the score to these two metrics. And what they're designed to do is encourage you to make thoughtful decisions. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good score on those. Your score will suffer. Here's how. Experimentation is based on you making changes. So we want you to try different things, like try different concession options, try different sponsorship settings. Instead of always going selective, go revenue maximization or whatever it is. So every time you make a change, you're earning points towards experimentation. And there are some caps and so on, which we explain at the bottom here, so that you can't just make all the changes in one event and get the maximum score. So you have to kind of distribute your changes over multiple events. So that's one, is encouraging experimentation through the scoring system. The second is problem solving, and that we did very simple methodology here. We have a focus tab. And the premise here is before each event, you have to identify which of these metrics you're going to focus your management time on. And if you think of real world of business, that's how management works. Is as a manager, you have a limited amount of time. And if you choose to focus your time on a particular metric, you'll be able to typically improve that metric. You won't be able to focus your time on everything. You have to identify and prioritize. And that's what we're trying to get the student to do here. So, in order to know which of these metrics to focus on, they actually have to come to the results area and look at the trends. Now, right now, we don't have any trends because we've only played one event, but let me launch a second event and we'll look at some trends. Okay, I've launched a second event. So now we have data for two events. You can see event two and event one. And now you can see the trends that are showing. So it's showing you, in this case, this is up 19 points, up 16 points, down 2 points, up 38%, up 21%. So the focus requires us to identify the metric that has had the most negative change. So in this case, there's actually only one that's gone negative, and that is profit margin. It's dropped 2 points. And so what we have to do here is set this to profit or profit margin, and we will get points by properly identifying what we should focus on. As we continue to play, we'll see that there's other metrics that are either going negative or just not performing as well as others, and that's where we would apply our focus. And so again, we are encouraging thoughtful decision making through these two scoring metrics. Let's keep going and show you another methodology we're using. So when we try to launch an event, you'll notice the strategy journal pops up. So it's encouraging us to enter some information here and specifically answer these three questions: which metrics are doing well, which metrics need improvement, and actions we are taking to improve. So this is very important. As an instructor, you can require the student make these entries for every event. And what this forces them to do now is go into their results, what they need to identify to answer these questions thoughtfully. Now, you may say, well, what if they just put gibberish in there? And I'm going to show you how we counter that. So, one of the ways is you'll see down here, we have a planning timer. What this is doing is actually timing how much time students are taking to make their decision. Now, I'm going to give you a big caution about time. You have to be very careful because we cannot track exactly what a student is doing in any app, any software, unless you're using some type of sophisticated camera system, which some systems will do for proctoring and so on. But even those are tricky. So you cannot know that a student is really thinking thoughtfully about something. So I'm very careful about time, but there is a way we can use it responsibly. So we are tracking how much time it takes a student to make their decisions. So if a student were to come in here and just blindly, randomly click through all the choices really fast, we're going to know that. And if we match that up to what they type in here, now we're going to know whether they're making thoughtful decisions or not. So, whatever we type in here is going to appear in our history. So, this is our strategy journal history. And whatever we typed will appear here, but you'll notice there's also some additional information. So, event two was launched 8 minutes after the previous event. So, I only took 8 minutes between events. That suggests that it wasn't thoughtful decision making. And it tracks the time between the first decision and the last decision, any changes made, and then the dates and timestamps of all of those things. Now, it is possible that maybe a student might think through a bunch of stuff and then quickly make their decisions. That's possible. So we don't want to penalize them for that. So this is another layer of what we can do. So as an instructor, we can take this information and combine it with an AI prompt that we've already written for instructors. And that AI prompt that you can use with any of their favorite AI platforms, it explains what the student is doing. It includes all of the student results. So, all of these results here, historical results, their activity log in terms of the changes that they're making and so on, and their strategy journal. And it asks them to evaluate that and provide feedback on what AI is seeing. So, for example, if a student is entering gibberish in the strategy journal, the AI is going to highlight that. If the student is entering what looks like real information, for example, the student might say that, concession revenue is low and I'm trying to improve concession revenue, but maybe that's not true. Maybe they just made that up. Well, the AI, by looking at all of this data, is going to know whether that was an accurate assessment or not. And so this is where we come into not only proof of work, has the student completed the simulation, proof of performance, how did they score on their performance report, and now evidence of learning based on what they wrote, how they reflected on their decisions, the choices they made, what they focused on, did that focus result in an improvement? The AI can now tell us if that satisfies those requirements for evidence of learning. And as an instructor, you don't have to rely on AI to come to conclusions. You can just rely on AI to highlight things for you. And then you can go in and look at the data yourself and come to your own conclusions on what you want to do in terms of the assessment and the grade. And of course, that's a little bit easier if you only have a few students. But I work with instructors that might have 600 students in one asynchronous class. If you don't have any teaching assistants, that would be an enormous amount of work. And you can lean on AI to do most of that work, if not all of it, with one observation or pass through from an instructor just to make sure that what you're seeing is real. But there's enough other information here in terms of proof of work and proof of performance that you don't have to rely on that AI assessment. It's there if you want it, if you want a useful, helpful tool, but you don't have to rely on it. So, all of these things in combination are what allow us to demonstrate proof of work, proof of performance, and evidence of learning. I'm going to stop there. Hopefully, you'll find this useful. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them. I'm Mathew Georghiou.